Your Harley isn't American. I don't care what the dealer told you. I don't care what the marketing says. And I don't care how many flags they slap on the commercials. That bike you paid premium dollars for because you wanted to support American manufacturing, you got played. I'm about to break down the biggest lie in motorcycling. How Harley Davidson has been selling you foreign bikes wrapped in American flags while charging you a heritage tax for the privilege. You think you bought into the American dream of motorcycling, but what you really bought was corporate greed disguised as patriotism. The worst part? Most riders have no clue they're funding the exact opposite of what they think they're supporting. Let's start with the language game that's been fooling riders for decades. You see Made in America plastered all over Harley's marketing, but when you dig into the fine print, the stuff they hope you never read, it says something completely different. Assembled in USA with domestic and imported parts. That's the real disclaimer hiding behind all that patriotic theater. But here's what assembly actually means in modern manufacturing. It's basically expensive Lego for adults. Assembly means they ship you a box of parts made everywhere except America, bolt them together in an American factory, slap a Made in USA sticker on it, and charge you like they mined the iron ore in Pennsylvania. It's the manufacturing equivalent of buying a frozen pizza and calling yourself a chef because you turned on the oven. I learned this the hard way when I was working on my buddy's Street 750. I started pulling panels to do some maintenance work. And what do I find? Made in Thailand, stamped right there on major engine components. Not hidden, not subtle, just sitting there laughing at everyone who thought they bought American. Then I started looking closer at other Harleys that came through the shop. Brembo brakes from Italy, Showa suspension from Japan. Then it's the ECUs and wiring harnesses from God knows where in Asia. It's just as bad as you might think. The more I dug, the more I realized the only thing American about most of these bikes was the final assembly and the inflated price tag. But here's where Harley's marketing department really shows their genius. So they know exactly what buttons to push. Every commercial is eagles and flag waving and American thunder because they understand that riders aren't just buying transportation. They're buying identity. You walk into a Harley dealership because you want to be part of something bigger than yourself. You want to connect with American manufacturing heritage, support American workers, and ride something that represents the values you believe in. That emotional connection is worth thousands of extra dollars to most buyers, and Harley knows it. The problem is they've been taking that emotional investment and laughing all the way to the bank while shipping your money overseas to the same factories that make everyone else's bikes. Look at their own financial reports if you want the real story. They'll tell you about global supply chain optimization and strategic international partnerships. On translation, we found cheaper ways to make the same stuff by using foreign labor, but we're still going to charge you premium American prices. The psychological damage here goes way deeper than just getting ripped off financially. When you buy what you think is an American motorcycle, you're making a statement about who you are and what you support. You're telling the world you believe in American craftsmanship, American jobs, and American quality. But when that bike breaks down and you discover the failed part was made in the same Chinese factory that supplies the budget brands you specifically avoided, it's not just your wallet that takes a hit, it's your entire sense of what you thought you were supporting. This isn't about being anti-globalization or anti-trade. This is about truth in advertising and corporate honesty. And if you want to source globally and compete on price, fine, but don't wrap yourself in the American flag while you do it. And don't charge American heritage prices for global manufacturing costs. The really infuriating part is how they've trained an entire generation of riders to defend this setup. Mention that Harleys aren't actually American made anymore, and watch how quickly people jump to defend the brand. They'll tell you assembly counts, or that all manufacturers do it, or that it doesn't matter where it's made as long as it runs. But it does matter. It matters because you paid extra specifically for American manufacturing. It matters because American workers lost jobs while you unknowingly funded their replacements overseas. And it matters because the entire brand identity you bought into was built on a foundation that no longer exists. Let me break down exactly where your supposedly American motorcycle actually comes from, because the truth is going to shock you. Starting with engines, the heart of any motorcycle. Remember Buell, Harley's own performance brand that they killed off? Those bikes were running Austrian Rotax engines. That's right. Harley Davidson's own subsidiary was using foreign engines while the parent company was selling American heritage. But that's just the beginning. Let's talk about the critical components that actually make your bike run. Your ECU, the brain that controls everything from fuel injection to ignition timing, comes from overseas suppliers. Same with your wiring harnesses, the nervous system of your motorcycle. These aren't minor parts we're talking about. These are the components that determine whether your bike starts, runs properly, or leaves you stranded on the side of the road. Then there's your braking system. Most Harleys run Brembo brakes, which are made in Italy. Now, don't get me wrong, Brembo makes excellent brakes. But when you're paying American prices for American manufacturing, finding Italian components is like ordering a steak and getting served pasta. Good pasta, maybe, but not what you ordered or paid for. Your suspension, that's Showa, straight from Japan. Again, quality components, but definitely not rolling off any assembly line in Milwaukee or York, Pennsylvania. Let's talk about frames and wheels, the literal foundation your bike is built on. Depending on your model, these are manufactured across Asia and Europe. I've seen frames with manufacturing stamps from Thailand, wheels from various Asian suppliers, and structural components that have traveled more miles getting to the assembly plant than most riders put on their bikes in a year. The electronics and fuel system components tell the same story. Sensors, fuel pumps, throttle bodies. The vast majority come from overseas suppliers who also supply other manufacturers. That means the fuel system in your Heritage Classic might share DNA with bikes from brands you've never heard of. Here's where the math gets really ugly. Industry analysts estimate that for most Harley models, somewhere between 60 to 80% of the components by value are sourced internationally. Let that sink in. You're paying American heritage prices for what's essentially an international parts bin special with final assembly in the US. I started documenting this after that first discovery on my buddy's street. And every time I worked on a Harley, I'd photograph the manufacturing stamps and country codes on major components. Thailand, Japan, China, Italy, Germany. It was like a world tour of motorcycle manufacturing, all hiding under American marketing. The Street 500 and 750 models were the most honest about this setup because they were built entirely in India at Harley's Bowell facility. And at least with those, they weren't pretending the bikes were American. But even the bikes assembled in York and Kansas City were packed with international components. What really drives me crazy is discovering made in Thailand stamps on engine cases of bikes that retail for 30 grand. You're not just paying a premium for American labor at that point. You're paying a massive markup for the privilege of being lied to about what you're actually buying. The fuel injection systems, ignition components, even basic electrical switches. Track down the manufacturing origin and you'll find the same suppliers feeding parts to Yamaha, Honda, and every other manufacturer. The only difference is Harley charges you double and wraps it in patriotic marketing. Then there's the quality control nightmare this creates. When your bike has components from 12 different countries, tracking down warranty issues becomes a detective story. Is that electrical problem from the German ECU, the Japanese wiring harness, or the Thai manufactured connector? Good luck getting a straight answer from your dealer. I've watched techs spend hours trying to source replacement parts because the component they need is back ordered from some supplier halfway around the world. Now, meanwhile, you're paying American labor rates to wait for international shipping. The really insulting part is how this global sourcing actually drives up your maintenance cost. Instead of having a streamlined American supply chain, you're dealing with the complexity and delays of international logistics every time something needs repair. But here's what bothers me most. Every one of these international components represents American jobs that got shipped overseas while Harley, they kept charging you like they were still supporting American workers. You paid the premium, but the jobs went to Thailand. Now let's follow the money and see exactly how Harley Davidson decided to abandon American manufacturing while keeping American prices. And the big turning point came when Harley opened their factory in Bowell, India back in 2011. They sold this as expanding into emerging markets. But what they really meant was, we found cheaper labor and we're going to use it. That Indian facility wasn't just for local sales. They were shipping bikes built with Indian labor back to markets that thought they were buying American motorcycles. Then came the Thailand facility in Rayong, and this is where the corporate greed gets really obvious. Harley built this plant specifically to dodge tariffs during the trade disputes. When the European Union slapped retaliatory tariffs on American motorcycles, instead of fighting for American manufacturing, Harley just moved production overseas to avoid the costs. Think about that for a second. The company that built its entire brand on American identity chose corporate profits over American principles the moment it became financially convenient. They literally abandoned American workers to save money on trade disputes. But here's the really disgusting part. They They announced this move publicly and their stock price went up. Wall Street rewarded them for shipping American jobs overseas while keeping the American premium pricing. The financial markets understood exactly what this meant for profit margins, even if riders didn't. And the timeline tells the whole story of corporate betrayal. First, they started sourcing individual components internationally to cut costs. Then they moved entire sub-assembly operations overseas. Finally, they built complete manufacturing facilities in countries with cheaper labor while maintaining the fiction that they were still an American company. Every single one of these decisions prioritized shareholder returns over the American workers and American communities that built the Harley Davidson brand. They took the loyalty and emotional investment of American riders and monetized it while systematically dismantling the manufacturing base that loyalty was supposed to support. This isn't unique to Harley, but that's exactly what makes it so infuriating. They're following the same playbook as every other American brand that discovered they could keep American prices while using foreign labor. The difference is most companies don't build their entire marketing strategy around patriotic identity while they're doing it. And look at their corporate communications during this transition. They talk about global competitiveness and operational efficiency, but never mention the American jobs lost or the communities affected. It's all sanitized corporate speak designed to hide the human cost of their profit optimization. I watched this happen in real time, and it was like watching someone tear down everything the brand supposedly stood for. Every announcement of a new overseas facility was another nail in the coffin of authentic American motorcycle manufacturing. The worst part is how they trained their dealer network to spin this story. Dealers started telling customers that global sourcing was actually better because it gave Harley access to world-class suppliers. They turned the abandonment of American manufacturing into a selling point about international quality standards. But riders weren't buying global sourcing. They were buying American heritage. They were paying extra specifically to support American manufacturing and American jobs. And when Harley took that money and sent it overseas while keeping the heritage pricing, that's not business strategy, that's fraud. The broader trend this represents is the complete hollowing out of American manufacturing by companies that built their brands on American identity. They keep the marketing, the pricing, and the brand recognition, but ship the actual work to wherever labor is cheapest. What really gets me is how preventable this was. I say there were American suppliers who could have provided these components. There were American workers ready to do this manufacturing, but corporate executives decided that maximizing quarterly profits was more important than maintaining the integrity of what they were selling. Financial reports tell the real story. Every move overseas improved their profit margins while degrading the authenticity of what customers thought they were buying. They literally monetized patriotism while abandoning the principles that patriotism was supposed to represent. This is why I can't respect the brand anymore. It's not about perfect purity or impossible standards. It's about basic honesty in what you're selling and who you're supporting with your business decisions. Here's where the corporate betrayal starts hitting your wallet and your safety in ways most riders never connect to the outsourcing decisions. Those Thailand-built bikes I mentioned, when they first started rolling off the line, warranty claims spiked hard. I'm talking about electrical failures, fuel system problems, and quality control issues that American-built Harleys rarely saw. The dealers tried to downplay it, but the service departments were swamped with bikes that should have been bulletproof, coming back with problems in the first few thousand miles. The real kicker is that most of these failures trace back to the exact components that got outsourced to cut costs. Electrical systems built by overseas suppliers who didn't understand the quality standards American riders expected. Fuel injection components that worked fine in laboratory conditions but failed when exposed to real-world riding conditions. I watched one of our local techs pull apart a Street 750 that kept throwing error codes. The ECU was made in one country, the wiring harness in another, and the sensors in a third. When he finally tracked down the problem, it was a compatibility issue between components that had never been tested together as a complete system. That's what happens when you build motorcycles like international parts bin specials. And the recall database tells the real story about outsourced quality control. Harley has issued recalls for everything from fuel system components to electrical harnesses. And when you trace the manufacturing origins, they consistently point back to overseas suppliers. These aren't minor issues. We're talking about fuel leaks, electrical fires, and complete system failures. Supply chain complexity is driving up your maintenance costs in ways that most riders don't even realize. When your bike needs a replacement part, instead of calling a domestic supplier and getting it shipped from across the country, your dealer is now dealing with international logistics, customs delays, and quality variations between production runs from different facilities. I've seen riders wait weeks for warranty repairs because the replacement part was back ordered from some facility in Asia. Meanwhile, you're paying American labor rates to wait for international shipping. That's not efficient manufacturing. That's a logistics nightmare disguised as cost savings. The techs I work with have horror stories about trying to diagnose problems on these globally sourced bikes. When everything comes from different suppliers with different quality standards, troubleshooting becomes guesswork. Here's what really drives me crazy. The quality control standards that made American manufacturing legendary got thrown out the window when production moved overseas. American suppliers had decades of experience building components that could handle American riding conditions, American fuel quality, and American maintenance practices. But when you source from suppliers who primarily serve other markets, you get components designed for different standards. That means parts that might work fine on a Honda in Tokyo, but fail on a Harley in Arizona because nobody tested them under American conditions with American fuel and American riding habits. The warranty claim data shows exactly what this global sourcing experiment has cost riders. Electrical system failures increased significantly when Harley started using overseas suppliers for wiring harnesses and ECUs. Fuel system problems spiked when they outsourced injection components to suppliers who didn't understand American fuel quality variations. Even basic mechanical components show quality degradation when sourced internationally. I've seen bolts that strip easier, gaskets that don't seal properly, and electrical connections that corrode faster than the American-made equivalents they replaced. The really insulting part is that riders are paying premium prices for this degraded quality control. You're not getting a discount because your bike is assembled from international components. You're paying the same American heritage prices for globally sourced quality problems. This is the hidden cost of corporate globalization that nobody talks about in the boardroom presentations. Every decision to source overseas creates quality control complexity that eventually shows up as problems in your garage. Let's talk about what you're actually getting for your money when you buy a Harley, because the math is going to make you sick. Walk into a dealership and see a heritage classic with a $35,000 price tag. The salesman tells you about American craftsmanship, Milwaukee heritage, and supporting American jobs. But here's what that money really buys you. Maybe 20% actual American manufacturing and 80% corporate markup disguised as patriotism. When I break down the actual manufacturing costs versus retail pricing, the numbers are insulting. You're paying premium American labor rates for bikes assembled with components that cost a fraction of what American-made equivalents would. That Brembo brake system might cost Harley $200 from Italy, but they're charging you like it was hand-forged in Wisconsin by union craftsmen making $40 an hour. The heritage tax is real, and it's massive. Take a Street 750, built entirely in India with Indian labor rates, and compare it to what Harley charges American customers. You're paying American prices for Indian manufacturing costs, and the difference goes straight into corporate profits and marketing budgets. Here's where it gets really ugly. Harley's profit margins on these globally sourced bikes are actually higher than they were when they manufactured domestically. They cut their manufacturing costs by moving overseas, but kept American premium pricing. That's not business efficiency. That's straight up financial fraud disguised as brand value. I've run the numbers on what genuine American manufacturing would actually cost, and the difference isn't as dramatic as Harley's accountants want you to believe. Yes, American labor costs more, but when you factor in shipping, logistics, quality control complexity, and warranty costs from overseas manufacturing, the real savings are maybe 10 to 15% of retail price. But instead of passing those modest savings to customers or keeping manufacturing domestic, Harley pocketed the difference and used it to fund marketing campaigns about American heritage. You're literally paying for the commercials that lie to you about what you're buying. Compare this to genuinely American-made alternatives, and the pricing makes even less sense. Indian Motorcycle, the actual American company, not the country, builds more of their bikes domestically than Harley does, often at competitive prices. Zero Motorcycles manufactures in California with American workers and charges less than Harley's premium models. The breakdown of where your money actually goes is infuriating. Maybe 30% goes to actual manufacturing costs, including all those overseas components. Another 20% covers dealer markup and corporate overhead, but the remaining 50%, that's pure heritage tax. You're paying extra for the privilege of believing you bought American while funding global supply chains. I've seen the dealer cost sheets, and the markups on these globally sourced bikes are astronomical. Dealers are making more profit per unit than they did when the bikes were actually American made because their costs went down while retail prices stayed high. The maintenance cost reality hits even harder. When something breaks on your heritage price motorcycle, you're paying American labor rates to wait for international parts shipping. I've watched customers get quoted $400 for electrical repairs that would have cost half that if the components were domestically sourced and readily available. Parts availability becomes a nightmare when your American motorcycle depends on suppliers scattered across 3 continents. That ECU failure might leave you waiting weeks for a replacement from Germany while you're still making payments on a bike you can't ride. And the really insulting part is how Harley's financial reports celebrate these overseas manufacturing decisions as margin improvements and operational efficiencies. They're literally bragging to Wall Street about how much extra profit they're extracting from customers who think they're supporting American manufacturing. When you calculate the total cost of ownership, purchase price, maintenance, parts availability, and resale value affected by quality issues, you're paying significantly more than genuine American alternatives would cost. You're funding corporate greed while getting less reliable transportation. The bottom line is brutal. You're paying American heritage prices for global manufacturing costs, and the difference is going straight into executive bonuses and shareholder dividends instead of American paychecks or better quality bikes. Here's the thing that's going to shock you. There are still companies building genuinely American motorcycles, and most riders have never heard of them because they're too busy getting fooled by Harley's marketing machine. Let's start with the obvious one that everyone overlooks. Indian Motorcycle. Yeah, I know the irony of the name, but Indian actually builds more of their bikes in America than Harley does. Their Spirit Lake, Iowa facility does real manufacturing, not just assembly of foreign parts. When you buy an Indian, you're getting significantly more American content than any comparable Harley. But the real gems are the smaller manufacturers that never sold out to global supply chains. Modus Motorcycles was building completely American sport tours in Birmingham, Alabama, until they closed down. And even then, they were sourcing domestically. When Harley was shipping jobs overseas, Confederate Motors, now Combat Motors, hand builds their machines in Alabama with American labor and American suppliers. Then there's the custom builder network that represents what American motorcycle manufacturing used to be. Companies like Revival Cycles in Austin, Shinya Kimura's Workshop, and dozens of other builders who machine their own parts, source domestically, and create bikes that are actually worthy of premium pricing. The electric revolution is where American manufacturing is making a real comeback. Zero Motorcycles builds everything in Scotts Valley, California. Lightning Motorcycle does their manufacturing in San Jose. These companies are proving you can build world-class motorcycles with American workers and American innovation without the corporate doublespeak. Here's your Buy Smarter checklist for avoiding the heritage tax scam. First, ask dealers specific questions they can't dodge. Where is the engine manufactured? Not assembled. Manufactured. Where are the frame, wheels, and major electrical components made? If they start talking about global suppliers and world-class quality, you're getting the runaround. Second, demand to see the actual manufacturing stamps on major components. Any legitimate dealer should be able to show you where critical parts come from. If they refuse or make excuses, walk away. You're about to get sold foreign components at American prices. Third, research the company's actual manufacturing footprint. Look at their financial reports, not their marketing materials. How many facilities do they operate overseas versus domestically? What percentage of their workforce is actually American? The numbers tell the real story about where your money goes. Support the network of genuinely American parts manufacturers and suppliers. Companies like S and S Cycle, Baker Drivetrain, and Mikuni American are still building components domestically with American workers. When you need aftermarket parts or performance upgrades, these companies deserve your business over the international suppliers that Harley switched to. The independent shop network is where real American motorcycle culture lives. These are the guys who understand what domestic manufacturing means and can guide you toward bikes and parts that actually support American jobs. They're not getting kickbacks from corporate headquarters to push globally sourced products. Build relationships with builders and mechanics who share your values about American manufacturing. They'll steer you toward genuinely domestic options and help you avoid the heritage tax trap that's fooling so many riders. The custom and restoration community represents everything Harley used to be before they sold out to global supply chains. These builders are machining parts, fabricating components, and creating motorcycles that embody the American craftsmanship that corporate Harley abandoned. Here's what supporting real American manufacturing looks like in practice. Instead of buying a $35,000 Harley with Thai components, you could get a genuinely American-built Indian for less money, or work with a custom builder to create something unique that employs American craftsmen and supports domestic suppliers. The community aspect matters too. When you support authentic American manufacturers, you're connecting with other riders who understand the difference between marketing mythology and manufacturing reality. You're building a network based on shared values instead of corporate brand loyalty. This isn't about perfection or impossible purity standards. It's about making informed decisions with your money and supporting companies that align with your values. If American manufacturing matters to you, put your money where your mouth is and support the companies that never abandon those principles for corporate profits. This whole situation proves that corporate America will sell you anything as long as the marketing budget is big enough. Harley Davidson took the most sacred thing in American motorcycling, the connection between rider identity and manufacturing heritage, and turned it into a profit center while shipping the actual work overseas. That's not business, that's betrayal. Drop a comment and tell me what foreign components you've discovered on your supposedly American bike. Subscribe for more industry truth-telling that the corporate marketing machines don't want you to hear.